Hello, Catherine here, and I'm going to show you some techniques on hand printing a linoleum block or other relief surface at home. Now, this is geared towards my printmaking 1 class, and right now you guys might have to print at home. So I have a few tips about organizing your space, especially if you have a limited amount of space. So I kind of divide up whatever space that I do have into different zones. Zone 1 I consider to be like the clean printing area. So up at the top I have an area for all my clean paper that I'm going to be printing on. Right below it, and probably a little too close, so long as I'm careful it should be okay, is my inking palette. Where I have my roller or my dauber and kind of my group of ink and then the flattened ink. And then I have one place here where this is kind of my zone for inking up the block. As you can see, the roller rolls off of it. And then I have an extra piece of paper, newsprint, that I might use to put on top of here. As a surface for me to print on top of. Now you won't have nearly as many things as I do here. This is everything I'm about to show for hand printing. So hopefully you should only have 1 or 2 extra tools there. Now what do you do with your prints as soon as you're done? There's a couple different things you can do. For me, my setup here at home, forgive the light, but I have strings along a bookshelf. I've kind of hung up string, and I've used clothespins to hang up my prints, trying to have it so that they're not really scraping up against each other. You can see there's some there, but it's very light, so hopefully it should not transfer. And as you can see on the very right side, in case you don't have string, I've also used clothes hangers. And if you don't have string to hang a clothes hanger on, sometimes I've hung prints on a shower rod or something similar, so long as no one is taking showers. And you can also see that I've used bulldog clips. So if you do not have paper clip, or if you do not have clothespins, I've used paper clips and bulldog clips. And of course, if you don't have any of these options, one more option, forget the light. Oops. Here, I'm going to take this off the stand. Is if you have a little bit of floor space. This is my studio, so it's very gross and paint and things like that on the ground. But if you just lay out some clean newsprint or newspaper, you can kind of lay out your prints on the ground and maybe move them somewhere else later to get them off the ground. But if you just need someplace close by to set it, I recommend putting something down between your prints and the ground. Alright, let me readjust my camera. Oops, sorry. Oh gosh. Okay. Alright. On to printing at home. So if you saw my last video, that was on 4 different ways to hand ink a lino cut or relief image. And so now I'm going to show you, I have this flamingo here. It is already pre-inked. I might kind of go over it a little bit just because I see some uneven inking. I'm going to place down this kind of clean paper on top of this dirty one. And this is going to be kind of a temporary printing zone. So I'm going to set down the most basic way for printing. If you're not worried about where it's sitting, I'm using basic printer paper right now, so nothing too fancy. I'm going to just hover this over, kind of maybe where I think it's centered. And if I do not want this to move, I will tape it down on 2 sides. like so. So let me tell you about some of the tools I have out. I have some more rollers. If you want to print, you can attempt to use some of the printmaking rollers by kind of starting on one side and rolling out. I usually don't tend to use these too much, but if you have thin paper or cloth, I find that this might be a good option for applying even pressure. Now this I would say is better for things that might be square or rectangular, because I run the risk, especially if I have a really squishy brayer, I would just say kind of a lower durometer, it like might be damaged by like rolling over the edge. So just be cautious of it wearing down. So two tools that I have right here are barens. This is the traditional Japanese baren for printing woodcuts. It is made with like a bamboo leaf that has been soaked, stretched, and wrapped around a disc, and inside under here is like a coil of rope. And this kind of has like a nice, like kind of mottled texture from the leaf. And so this helps with very nice even printing, especially if you're doing anything with thinner paper or kind of the watercolor base. And of course, Speedball has two versions on the market. There's one that's like this, but it's like all plastic and like a plastic disc. And then this is one where they have like mesh and kind of a soft cushion here. And I like this better than the plastic solid one myself. And these work by kind of, I like to start in the center and work my way out in the cardinal directions, thinking about like a compass. So I go north, south, east, west. This might ensure to get out air bubbles and make sure that this is sitting in one place. So I might follow the cardinal directions to get it on, and then what I'll do is kind of apply pressure. Sometimes it actually might be better if you like hold it like this and the pressure might be coming from the palm. And I would say use the strength from your shoulder all the way down rather than making it a hand pressure thing. And I go all the way around in counterclockwise, up and down, and then maybe I'll do clockwise. And sometimes if I'm printing a large edition where I need them to all be the same, I will keep track of this pattern of how I print it. So I'll be like, okay, I start in one corner and then I go for so long in another. And I go clockwise, counterclockwise, and how many times do I do that? All right, so let's go ahead and check to see how much I've done. So one of the other good points about maybe taping down your paper in advance is that it allows you to gently check the status of your print to see if you need to maybe go back and return to some areas to like print or add more pressure. Although this feels pretty nice. Let's see. Whoops. Well, as you can see, it's a little bit light in here. Some of that could be from I'm using a very transparent ink. But I also think that you can also see a lot of like texture, and that could be both from the texture of the linoleum, but also the texture of the ink that's on there. So I'm going to go return to it and kind of put more applied pressure in kind of the specific areas I see that are really light. I don't know how well you can see this, but there is a place here where there's this large dot with a halo around it. That is coming from something I think I see here that has gotten stuck to the block. I'm going to go ahead and remove it. Usually I might wait for the next print to kind of remove it. But that just kind of shows you that something is stuck on the block or glued onto the block and is kind of disrupting a smooth, even print. So I'm going to go ahead and let this lay back down. Hopefully it has not shifted. And now I'll kind of show you kind of the spoon method. So either using the backside of a metal spoon or a wooden spoon, or maybe you have some other kind of spoon that has a nice surface area. I prefer something like a soup spoon over like a teaspoon. Basically, I'll just kind of apply pressure to the center. And so this, compared to a baren, maybe has fewer contact points, but I think I like my wooden spoon because I feel like it gives a nice consistent pressure to whatever area I'm trying to print. So let me just try like the head, and then I'll show you what that looks like. So like the baren, I like to go in small circles or kind of go in straight lines. But sometimes the direction and how you print will actually show up in the print. So sometimes I like to make it very intentional, or have it kind of follow the form so it doesn't like stand out completely. All right, let's check the progress. All right, so it's still a little bit light. But you can kind of see within here at least, like the beak, it's a lot kind of a darker tone than say some of the areas over here. So if you kind of concentrate on certain areas a little more, a little longer, it'll kind of become more solid. So let me try the wooden, the metal spoon up here. And it could be that maybe I didn't ink this area as much. I'll have to take a closer look at my block. So let me see. And I think that might be the case. If you take a close look, there's almost like a straight line coming down. So that actually probably tells me it's less my motion of printing, but actually the way I kind of inked it. Things like that. So I'm going to just kind of go over this a little bit more. Okay, so for freehand printing, I think this is pretty good. So it's a little light over here, and there's a couple spots like here and here where there's something stuck to the block. Oops, I'll set this aside. Now, of course, this design was created for a reductive woodcut, meaning I'm planning on printing this in multiple layers of color. So I need to make sure that I'm not just like willy-nilly putting it anywhere on the surface. I might want to create what's called a registration system so that I can align all my paper to the same place on the block. So let me re-ink this. So after every print, you want to re-ink it, unless you want to take a ghost print and see like a faint version of what was on the block. Okay. 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 And I kind of, when inking, sometimes the last kind of strokes I'll do will be very light and soft to like smooth out any potential lines. All right. So the first registration I have, this is kind of more challenging for registration because this is a free-floating shape. So if you do have like a free-floating shape, one thing that I sometimes do is just have like a registration sheet where I've outlined where it's supposed to go. So you want to be careful not to touch the surface of your lino cut and kind of slide it right in there. There you go. And so for this, I will try to look as directly above as possible, and I will kind of just like line up the paper here. So I'm using like a registration sheet the same size as the paper I'm going to be printing on for this instant, but you can also like draw something the size of your paper on a larger sheet that goes underneath. All right, so let's see. So I'm just going to use this just to make sure it's on there. And this time, let me go ahead and try out. I have like the can of corn. You can use beans, you can use any kind of thing in a can. So let me see. So very much like the baren, I might start from one side and continue. Before I forget, if you have thicker paper, if you have paper that has a tendency to pill, if you're going to be working with damp paper, I'm going to have another video about that. You might actually want to put like a piece of wax paper, parchment paper, freezer paper between your print and whatever you're burnishing the image with. So that feels much better. So it reduces that friction. So hopefully less of your energy is going towards like being stuck on the paper and more towards the pressure going down. What's nice about the can is that I guess because it's like a ring, it has more contact points. Whereas with your spoons, you have like wherever that like line or kind of dot where this back of the spoon meets the flat surface of your print. So this might actually, so I kind of see the print. Let's see how well it printed with just like a can. Ooh, not too bad. It's still a little bit light in some areas. You might notice that it's particularly darker near the edges, and that's where it kind of like hits it more. So let me go over a little bit more in some of these areas that are like in the center. Hit it from all angles. I imagine you could also use like a bone folder as well on its side. So let's take a quick look. So if I had more time, I'd probably like go back into some of these areas in the center just because I still see some ink on the block. Let me see with the spoon. Oops, I just moved it. Okay, so let me get this off of here. So actually that made a little bit of a difference. There's like kind of this stripe. So I would say be inventive, figure out what tools can work. This is like my third time filming this video because I lost the other one, so I don't remember if I said that I know some people who've used snow globes for their burnishing tool, which I thought was kind of funny. So one last registration trick is using what's called either T-bar registration or Kento marks. So these are both slightly different techniques. Kento marks kind of come from Japanese woodblock printing, whereas the T-bar, I don't know when it was invented, but I used it the most in lithography. Let's see. This might be a good time to like put out more ink on my palette, but I don't want to keep this too long. All right. So here is a sheet. I'll walk you through it. So this is kind of a registration guide if you have, say, a rectangular print rather than like a free floating shape. And so if I had like a 6x8 block, an 8x10 paper, I would kind of measure it so that everything is centered. And there's a couple kind of marks you might see. One says T-bar. So I have all my paper in advance. I will set it maybe on this registration sheet. And I will draw marks on both sides, one across from the other. And it kind of lines up in a T shape. So along that edge, and then on the back of that paper. So as long as you're able to see that, you should be able to like place your paper and have them align with this point to make sure that it's registered. Now, I have two marks here that I've labeled Kento. In traditional Japanese printing, Kento marks are actually carved right on the block. And so they're usually like stops that are spaced between, like, if your hand is fully extended, it usually hits like where your middle finger is or your pointer finger, and then your thumb. So for me, it's kind of set right there. It's kind of a natural space that you might always return to. So for me, I also have Kento marks here. So that's one way to like register your blocks. I've also seen people make, if say you have a block like this, I've also seen people use scrap linoleum or cardboard and make almost like an L shape that you can set up against your block, and it has like marks on it, kind of like a right angle, and marking where the edge of the paper is and lining it up with that. Alright, so I'll print this guy using this method. This is not lined up for this shape, but this just to show you. So that was not the best job. But okay. And if it's early enough, if it hasn't like stuck yet, you can kind of readjust it. Okay. All right, let's take a look. All right, it's not too bad. It's starting to get very textured. I'd probably go back and burnish it some more. I think I have some older ink that's kind of accumulated and I haven't flattened it back out. So one suggestion I have is that if you have like a dauber or a roller, is sometimes before you reapply more ink, just smooth out what's already on the lino block as best as you can. And if it does start to seem to interfere with your printing, especially if anybody is using something other than printing ink, like if you've made your own ink for this or paint, you might occasionally need to clean. Oops. I would say maybe don't do that on your registration sheet. You know, pick this up and put it back. So because this might be new, you might want to have a couple of registration sheets made up. So I'll have another video on how to print using dampened paper, which is good if you're using a thicker paper or sometimes if you're using like a watercolor or a paint, just because some papers do have, especially thicker papers, might have what's called sizing in it. And to get a better quality print, you might want to dampen your paper first. So I'll have another video soon about how to print with dampened paper. All right, thank you.